I've seen so many of these tie front peplum blouses with puff sleeves for the last few years, and I thought it was about time I made one for myself. Hi, I'm Megan Nielsen. I'm an Aussie designer and I make easy-to-use sewing patterns that help you make a wardrobe that works with your lifestyle. Let's get sewing. Now, the great news is that this is a really easy pattern hack, so you don't even need to buy a new pattern. I'm using my Protea capsule wardrobe pattern as it already has a lot of the elements that I want, namely a bodice with darts, a skirt, and sleeves. Other patterns that would work well from my pattern catalogue are Darling Ranges and Dove. You could even use the Durban jumpsuit. So let's do some really easy pattern alterations. First, we'll cut out pattern piece 1, the front bodice, and do the world's easiest pattern alteration. Instead of cutting 1 on the fold, we'll be cutting 2. Cut out pattern piece 2, the back bodice, and 5, the back facing, and put them aside. They don't need any alterations. Grab pattern piece 8, the skirt, and to make things easy, we'll be cutting along the tiered skirt cut line. You can keep the top part of the skirt for another project. We'll just be using the bottom section for our peplum. Mark it with the pattern name, and we'll be cutting 2 for the front and 1 on the fold for the back. Next, you'll need some scrap pattern paper. Line up the center front edge of the front bodice with the straight edge of the paper and mark the top and bottom of the center front. Take the front facing 4 and change the directions from cut 1 on the fold to cut 2 interfaced. Line up the top of that pattern piece with the top marking and tape it in place. Measure in 6.5 centimeters or 2.5 inches from the edge at the base of the facing and also at the bottom marking. Join your lines with a ruler and smooth the intersection of the straight and curved line. You can see here I knew I needed a gentle curve but had drawn too far, so I made a much too steep transition. I was really unhappy with this, so I corrected it when I cut my fabric, but don't make the same mistake yourself. Now for the puffy sleeves. Draw 4 slash lines on your sleeve head, 2 between each of the top notches and the sleeve cap. We're placing our slash lines here for 2 reasons. 1, it's easier as you don't need to move your notch positions, and also because it focuses the volume on the shoulder area, which is what we want. Once you've drawn your slash lines, cut along the lines. Take another piece of paper with a straight edge and draw a line 5 centimeters or 2 inches from the edge. Now the edge of that paper is going to be your hemline. This line is just a guideline, we're not going to cut along it. Taking the middle piece of the sleeve, align the bottom edge with the line and tape it in place. Take the remaining sleeve pieces and space them 5 centimeters or 2 inches apart with the bottom edge on the line and tape them all in place. Now we're going for super puffy Anne of Green Gables level puff sleeves here, people. If that's not really your thing, that's fine. Just don't spread your pattern pieces out as much as I did. Next up, you'll need to redraw your sleeve cap. Take a curved ruler and starting at the upper edge of the pattern near the notch, draw a smooth curve to just above the sleeve cap or whatever looks right. Don't forget to do both sides and mark your sleeve cap notch. This method will increase the sleeve cap height, which will result in more room for puff. We could have maintained the original sleeve cap, however this would have meant having to transfer the sleeve notches on the sides of the sleeve cap. But why make our lives more complicated? I say keep it simple and add the cap volume. Lastly, straighten out those side seams and cut around the sleeve. The edge of the paper will be your new sleeve hem. I'm also making 2 additional pattern pieces for this hack that are not included in the pattern. The first is a placket facing. I'm not really interested in a wardrobe malfunction or anyone seeing my bra, so I don't want a gap in the middle of my top like most of the inspiration images I saw. So I'll be making a placket facing. This is going to be the height of the center front bodice and is 10 centimeters or 4 inches wide. We'll be cutting 1 and interfacing it. The last pattern piece will be for the ties. We'll be cutting 6 to make 3 ties. This pattern piece is also a simple rectangle and mine measures 5 centimeters or 2 inches wide and 34 centimeters or 13 inches long. Once you have all your pattern pieces, you can cut out your fabric in the middle of the night if you're like me, and that's when your available sewing time is. Don't forget to attach interfacing to the back facing, the 2 front facing pieces, and also the placket facing. All right, let's get sewing. I like starting with darts because I do. Mark your darts by your preferred method. I like to mark the dart point with a pencil straight through my pattern piece and my dart legs with snips. And then I just fold the dart in half and pin it. Head over to the sewing machine and sew the darts. This is how I like to knot my ends. I always put a pin in the dart point and then I tie my knot around the pin, which allows me to pull it really tight and avoid puckers. Press your darts down towards the waist. Grab the back bodice and place the front bodice pieces right sides together. Sew the side and shoulder seams 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge. Finish your raw edges by your preferred method. I'm using an overlocker, and then press your seams either open or to the back. Take your 6 ties and you'll be folding each one in half widthways with right sides together and pinning. Sew along one short edge and the long edge 1 centimeters or 3/8 of an inch from the raw edge. This will make ties which are 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch wide. Clip the corner of the seam allowance and turn your ties right side out. I like to use a chopstick for this. Give them all a nice press and make sure all the corners look good. Line up the raw edges of your ties with the raw edges of the center front edge. The first 2 ties will be placed ever so slightly more than 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the top edge. The third row of ties will be placed ever so slightly more than 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the bottom edge or waistline. The second row of ties will be positioned in the middle, equally distant from the first and third row of ties. This should roughly align with your bust darts, which will help prevent a gaping top. You can baste these in place or just pin them as I have. Next up, let's work on that placket facing. Fold it in half widthways with right sides together and align the raw edges. Sew along the top and bottom edges 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge. Clip the corners of your seam allowance, turn your placket facing the right way around and reshape the corners and press well. Place your placket facing on the right bodice with right sides together and so that the center front raw edges are aligned. Make sure the top of the placket facing is lined up with the top tie and the bottom of the placket facing is lined up with the bottom tie. You can baste in place or just pin as I have. Take your back facing and your front facing pieces and align the shoulder seams with right sides together. Sew the shoulder seams 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge and press open. Finish the outer raw edge of your facing by your desired method. I'll be overlocking. This is why that smooth transition is so important on that outer edge, because it makes finishing the raw edge with an overlocker that much easier. If you're adding a label to your garment, this is the perfect time to attach it to your back facing. My favorite trick is to just use a stick of washable glue and stick the label on with that. I hate changing my thread midway through a project, but it does make a huge difference aesthetically to match your thread to your label. If you're looking for fun labels to add to your project, I love the labels from Kylie and the Machine. They're always really fun. Place your facings on your top with right sides together and align the raw edges along the neckline and center front edges. Pin in place. If you've pinned your ties and placket facing, make sure to transfer those pins carefully. This was when I realized I had forgotten to stay stitch my curved neckline edges and they had stretched a bit, so I had to ease them into the facings. So don't forget to stay stitch your curved neckline edges. It's a very important step and it's super annoying to have to ease things into the facing. Attach the facings and the ties to the top by sewing 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge all the way up the left center front, around the neckline and back down the right center front. Clip into the seam allowance of all of your curved edges, being careful not to cut through the stitches. This will help you turn your facings to the inside of the garment smoothly. Press the facings and seam allowances away from the garment wherever possible. Though you can get away without understitching, please don't skip it. This step is really important in preventing your facings from showing on the right side of the garment and helps keep everything nice and neat on the inside of the garment. You won't be able to get all the way to the corner of the center front neckline, but just get as close as you can. You can see I started about 1 centimeter from the corner at the front and sewed around the neckline, ending 1 centimeter from the corner again. Down the center front, I understitched starting around 1 centimeter from the corner and all the way down to the waistline. I have to admit here that I'm not a huge fan of facings in general. I just find it uncomfortable when they're loose inside my clothing, so I usually prefer to either top stitch them down or secure them in an inconspicuous spot. Here I am pinning the shoulder seams of the facing to the shoulder seams of the top and pinning the back facing to the top as well. I then sew down the shoulder seam around the facing and back up the other shoulder seam. This resulted in a secured back facing, and the shoulder seams were also secured and allowed me to leave the front facings free of top stitching, which was more aesthetically pleasing, if you ask me. Okay, let's make a peplum. You should have 2 front peplum pieces and 1 back peplum piece. Place them right sides together with the side seams aligned and pin in place. Sew the 2 side seams 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge. Neaten your raw edges, head over to the iron and press your seams towards the back. Turn in 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch at the short edges and press. Turn in 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch at the short edges again and press. Sew the center front edges of the peplum just under 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge. Heading back to the iron, we'll work on the peplum hemline now. Fold in 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch and press all the way along the bottom edge. Then fold in 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch once more and press. Back at the sewing machine, sew the hem just under 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Now it's time to gather up the peplum and attach it to the bodice waist. I did an exceptional job of filming the back of my head instead of the basting for the gathers, but here's what you'll need to do. Set your stitch length to the longest on your machine and sew 2 lines of basting, one at 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge and one 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch from the raw edge. It's a bit much to gather an entire skirt in one go without breaking threads, so I prefer to gather in sections. Sew your 2 rows of basting on each panel separately so you can gather each panel separately. Lay out your bodice with right sides facing up. I'm doing it on my couch because it's cold and the fireplace is warm. Place your peplum on your bodice with right sides together and align the side seams at the raw edges and pin, and align the center front edge of the peplum with the center front of the blouse. Make sure you have your facings flipped out like I do so you don't catch them in your sewing. Secure one side of your gathering threads. I like to do this by wrapping them around a pin in a figure 8. Then grab both threads on the other side and gently tug while you hold the fabric stationary, and it will gather up nicely. Once you have made the peplum the same length as the bodice, secure the threads again. Now it's time to even out those gathers as best you can and pin them in place. Follow these steps for the left front peplum panel, the back peplum panel, and the right front peplum panel. I can't say peplum panel anymore. Sew the peplum to the blouse 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge all the way around the waistline, and make sure you don't catch the facings or the ties in your sewing. Now let's attach those facings. Fold the facing over the blouse and peplum with right sides together and sew the bottom edge of the facing 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge. Do this on both sides of the center front facings. Now we'll finish the raw edges of the waistline by your preferred method. I'm overlocking. Head over to the iron and turn the facings to the inside of the garment, and you'll have a lovely clean finish at the bottom of the facing. Press your seams up towards the bodice all the way around. Now it's time for some exceptionally puffy sleeves. Fold your sleeves in half, right sides together, and sew each sleeve seam 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge. Finish the raw edges by your desired method and press the seams to the side. Turn your sleeves the right way around and let's sew some basting for gathers. Set your sewing machine to the longest stitch length again, and you'll need to sew 2 rows of basting between the upper shoulder notches. The rows of basting will be 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge and 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch from the raw edge. Insert your sleeves into your arm's eye and align the notches using your rows of basting to gather the sleeve heads until they are the same length as the arm's eye and pin in place. Sew 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge around the arm's eye. Finish the raw edges by your preferred method and press your seams to the inside of the sleeve. I did not press mine as I really liked how puffy they were looking and I didn't want to flatten them with pressing. Back at the iron, fold under 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch at the sleeve hems and press. Then fold under 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch at the sleeve hem again and press. Now we're going to sew just under 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch from the hem edge around the whole hem to create a elastic casing. And we're going to leave a 1-inch gap in our sewing to allow us to thread the elastic in. Measure the circumference of your arm above your elbow and add 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch. Attach a safety pin to the end of your elastic and use this to thread your elastic through the hem casing. When you reach the other side, overlap the 2 ends of the elastic and sew them together. Stretch your sleeve hem out a few times to evenly distribute your elastic and then sew the gap in your sleeve hem closed. The only thing left to do now is wear it. Well, I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial for how to turn my Protea sewing pattern, or any pattern that you have in your stash that has a bodice, a skirt and a sleeve, into this blouse that has a tie front, a peplum and a puffy sleeve. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll see you next time, and happy sewing!